Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of Spinner of Yarns, where we read you stories out loud from authors that are trying to promote their work. We are trying to build this channel right now to incorporate other authors and build a following that they can read their stories to. So if you do like what you hear, please do subscribe, hit the notification bell down below, like this video. Also, support the cause if you're feeling so generous. There are links in the description, as well as up in the bar for the channel that lead to my eBay, Etsy, Redbubble. That's what I use to support my daughter and support the writing. So, we are going to be getting into the next chapter of my book, Blood of the Wolf. You can find it on Amazon.com in paperback, the Kindle format. You can also find it at BarnesandNoble.com. So, our next chapter is Chapter 10, True Alpha. Michael and Lisa decided to set a night aside for themselves so they could just feel normal for once. He took her to dinner at one of the nicest restaurants in town and then to the nightclub she had always said she wanted to check out. From the outside, club looked like it would be a lot of fun. They waited in line for almost an hour before they got to the front, where they had to pay the cover charge. As they were entering the club, Michael caught the scent of a wolf. He wondered if one of the shadow wolves had the same idea and just happened to be at the club until he realized it was coming from the bouncer at the door. Just as he made the realization, so did the bouncer. Michael just raised an eyebrow, but the bouncer curled his lip, and his eyes began to glow slightly. Lisa saw the look they had given each other, so she tugged on Michael's arm to get his attention. What's going on? Michael placed a hand on her wrist and began to push her behind him, when another man in a suit approached and placed a hand on the bouncer's shoulder. What's the holdup? We have people waiting to get inside. The bouncer started to speak, but the man in the suit just pushed past him and greeted Michael with a firm handshake. Sorry for the holdup, folks. I'm the owner of this club, Michael Booker. But you can just call me Booker. He ushered them both past security and escorted them to a table. Then he waved a waitress over with some menus, so they could order some soda and food if they wanted. Sorry about my security. They get a little on edge at times and forget their manners. Please let my staff know if we can get you anything, and have a great time. Michael just smiled, nodded his head, and then thanked Booker for his hospitality. When Booker and the waitress left, Lisa grabbed Michael's hand to get his attention again. Michael, what was that all about? Michael looked all around the room and took in a deep breath. I was so focused on having a normal night out with you that I didn't even notice until it was too late. I thought some of the shadow wolves had decided to have a night out as well. That was until I realized the scent was coming from the bouncer at the door, the club owner, and the waitress. In fact, I think all the staff might be werewolves. There may even be some random customers in the crowd that are too. I think we're in a den. Lisa looked around the room. But aren't they your people? Michael shook his head. Yes and no. I don't smell the taint of evil in here, at least not strongly, so I don't believe they're fallen wolves. However, they are feral, so they don't know their origins. It's been so long since my people inhabited this planet that they most likely think their kind has always been like this. Right now, they would just see me as an unfamiliar wolf in their territory. Lisa began to get a little nervous. So what now? Michael looked into her eyes and squeezed her hand a little to comfort her. Well, I'm pretty sure the only reason they haven't challenged me yet is because they don't want to alarm the other customers that don't know. We should probably leave, though, before that changes. Lisa nodded and grabbed her purse, but as she started to stand up, two hands pushed her down. Michael looked to see a girl in her late teens standing behind Lisa and looking past him. He heard a male voice behind him. But you just got here. Why would you want to leave so soon? Michael looked at the girl standing behind Lisa and curled his lip. Let her go. Again, he heard the male's voice behind him, but this time he sounded angry that he was being ignored. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Lisa's eyes got wide, but Michael had already sensed the attack from behind. He shifted slightly to the left in his chair and delivered an elbow behind him that caught the male behind him in the hip and sent him flying through some tables, knocking over drinks. He put his hands on the table and slowly stood up, with a red glow beginning to gleam in his eyes. As he looked at the female behind Lisa, he could see the fear coupled with excitement in her eyes. This time when Michael spoke, he almost growled, Let her go. The female slowly backed away, but almost looked turned on by an encounter with a true alpha. Not just a pup, hopped up on testosterone. I'm not through with you yet. Michael heard the tables moving aside as the young wolf picked himself back up and began charging. As Michael turned around with his eyes glowing red, the young wolf almost tripped over his feet, trying to stop himself, but not before getting grabbed by the throat and lifted into the air. As Michael held him there, all the fight drained out of him and he pissed himself in submission. Michael curled his lips and ran his tongue over his fangs in frustration. Just as he was about to toss the young wolf aside, he heard Lisa scream from behind. He looked to see the bouncer moving through the crowd towards the hallway, and he had Lisa by the throat. Follow me if you want your bitch back! Instead of letting the young wolf go, he dropped his arm and started dragging him as he moved through the crowd towards the hall to follow. The female was excited by what she was seeing and decided to join the chase to see how it would end. As Michael ran down the hallway dragging the young wolf who was grasping at his hand, trying to loosen the grip, the female was, of course, enthusiastically giggling the whole way. They came to a door that Michael could tell they had gone through by their scent. He rushed through the door and found stairs leading down. From there he found another larger door, which led into some catacombs that must have been part of the old sewer lines. As he followed their scent into a narrow hallway off the main tunnel, he heard grinding as a metal wall moved and blocked his path. A second wall moved in behind and trapped him inside with the two teens. Dim lights lit the room they were now trapped in. Michael looked down at the male wolf that was still struggling and tossed him to the side. The female giggled some more, which Michael was beginning to find annoying, as he looked over at her and raised an eyebrow. He shook his head and looked back down at the male wolf. Where have they taken her? And what is this room? The male wolf began to get up, still acting very cocky, but far more cautious now. How the hell should I know? I just heard this place was where others of our kind came to have fun, so I brought my girl out for a good time. Michael glared down at him. If you don't know what's going on, then why did you attack us? He pulled a couple $100 bills out of his pocket. The bouncer. He gave me this and said to distract you if you tried to leave. He said they've been tracking you, but they've never heard of your pack, so they're calling in the elders. Michael shook his head. Something tells me he didn't want you to start a fight. Given the amount of money, he probably wanted you to make friends. He just wasn't asking you to do it on your own dime. Michael heard a speaker turn on in the room. Perceptive. Now where did you come from? We've never heard of a pack called the Shadow Wolves. Michael looked around for the camera he knew must be watching them. Let me out of here. Let me see my girl's okay. Then I'll talk. The voice on the speaker chuckled a little. You don't seem to understand. You're in our territory, and we're the ones that give the orders. Michael's rage began to grow as he kicked the metal wall in front of him and left a sizable dent in it. The voice on the speaker sighed. Well, I can see we're going to have to try a different approach. Michael started to hear a hissing sound, like air rushing through pipes. As he looked around, he could see gas being piped in through vents in the floor. The female wolf in the room began to panic. Wolfsbane! Michael just shook his head. I'm getting tired of this. He held out one hand in the direction of the two wolves in the room and elevated them up above the growing cloud, then held his other hand towards the wall in front of him and focused on its mechanical mechanisms. The wall began sliding open, much to the irritation of the voice on the other end of the loudspeaker. No, you can't! That's impossible! Michael walked further down the hallway and let the two wolves down to walk on their own once they were clear of the wolfsbane. The female wolf ran forward. How'd the wolfsbane not affect you? You're a werewolf, aren't you? Michael glanced at her as he kept walking. I'm a wolf, but not like you. She looked confused but kept following, as did the male wolf, that was now just as curious as she was. They walked down the hallway for another couple of minutes before Michael stopped at a point where it turned to corner. He smiled and shook his head. The female looked puzzled. What? Michael looked back. Welcoming party. As he rounded the corner, he could see 6 werewolves fully shifted, pacing back and forth like they were ready for a fight. Behind them were the bouncer, Booker the club owner, and 2 older men in suits. The bouncer still had Lisa by the throat, which made the rage in Michael grow, and as it did, his eyes glowed bright red. He let out a roar and a wave of psychic energy that shook the walls. Let her go! I will not warn you again. The bouncer ignored him and ordered the 6 shifted wolves to attack, but they were cowering in the face of a true alpha. Fine, then I'll do it myself. He pushed Lisa towards Booker, who just put a hand on her shoulder. Something tells me that's not a good idea. The bouncer looked back at Booker and growled, which is why my father rules the pack in this territory. The fact that I take orders from you at the club is an insult. Booker gestured towards Michael. Well, then by all means, Your Highness, don't let me stop you. The bouncer shifted into full werewolf form and started stomping towards Michael, growling and drooling at the thought of tearing into him. Michael just stood his ground as the two younger wolves moved off to the side to watch the fight. Booker stared at Michael, waiting for him to shift. Why doesn't he shift? Lisa looked up at Booker. Because he's a thunderwolf. Booker looked down at Lisa and then back at the two older men in suits who were both looking very confused at the title. The bouncer charged in at Michael, but he looked stunned when Michael disappeared into the shadows and appeared behind him. Michael grabbed him by the fur on his back and tossed him into a wall off to his left. Then he rushed in and kicked him in the ribs, burying him even further in the wall. As the bouncer tried to pick himself up out of the wall, Michael caught him with a hammer fist in the forehead, which left him drooling and dazed. But Michael wasn't done there. He was going to make an example of this one for threatening Lisa. He grabbed him by the fur on his chest and threw him into the wall on the other side of the hall. Then he pulled him out of the wall telekinetically and levitated him in front of him, just before unleashing a telekinetic force blast that sent the bouncer flying down the hallway past Booker, the two men in suits, and through a steel door at the end. Booker stared down the hallway in the direction of the bouncer, who was lying in a heap and barely breathing. Damn! Then he turned back to see Michael right in front of him. Booker jumped back and pushed Lisa forward, throwing up his hands. Not my idea to take your girl. I'm just trying to set up a meeting with our elders. Michael put his arm around Lisa and then stared past Booker to the two men in suits, who were still staring down the hallway at the heap of broken wolf. As they turned to look back at Michael, one was calm while the other's eyes were glowing red. He was snarling and looking as if he was trying to contain the change, but not doing well. That elder wolf began to step forward as Michael pushed Lisa behind him and put a shield around her at this time. As the claws began to elongate on the wolf's hands, he struggled to speak under his growl. How dare you come into our territory and try to claim it for your own? Know your place, pup, before I tear you and your bitch apart where you stand. The other elder looked as though he wanted to speak, but then decided to just walk over and stand next to Booker, who had backed away to witness this next battle that appeared like it was about to begin. Hearing this new threat to Lisa, Michael was done playing nice. He raised his hand and froze the elder in place. Then he raised him up off the ground and began to walk forward. He stood there staring at him for a few seconds with his eyes glowing bright red, and he was snarling with anger. He could feel the elder struggling as he continued to shift into full werewolf form within Michael's grasp. Michael looked over at the calmer of the two elders, trying to contain his rage. Give me one good reason I shouldn't destroy him. The elder contemplated the request. Because he's my brother, and he's the leader of the Portland Pack. If you kill him, there'll be war, and we'll be forced to hunt you down. However, I'm not entirely sure that's avoidable. My brother and I have not been seeing eye to eye for many years now. I believe he's too bold in his desires to return to the old ways of hunting the humans, instead of coexisting as we have been for so long. The other elder struggled to break free, but Michael could tell his attention had turned to that of his brother. Shut up, Angus, or you'll be next when I finish with this inferior little whelp. Michael looked back at the fully shifted elder. What exactly do you think you're going to do? You have no power to break free, and as far as you telling me to know my place, my kind are gods to your kind. You're simply the result of a curse upon my people. So we would be distracted, fighting over our own kind, instead of continuing our fight against the god that broke the treaty. The elder roared, Insolence! You will die! Michael snarled in frustration. He focused on the cells in the elder's body and forcibly reverted him back to human form. Inferior mutt! With a wave of his hand, he launched the elder back into the wall and knocked him unconscious. Michael turned back to face Booker and the other elder, who were completely in shock. The elder stepped forward. I don't even know where to begin. Were you telling the truth? Michael nodded. Yes, you are the result of a curse placed on my people, the Thunderwolves. Every time we would bite someone in battle after the casting of the curse, they would turn into a feral species of wolves, or werewolves. It forced us to change some of our tactics. but not before we were overwhelmed by legions of mindless beasts attacking the countryside. We killed what we could, but like the vampire, they spread like a plague. I must say that not including tonight's bloodshed, your kind has evolved quite a bit. The elder grumbled a little. Thank you, I think. Booker thought for a second. Why doesn't the wolfsbane affect you? It's because wolfsbane and silver were ingredients in the curse. Since my people predate the curse, we are immune. Wolfsbane can't harm us, and neither can silver, unless it's imbued with magic. It only works on those that are a result of the curse. Well, then if we are the result of a curse placed on your kind, and your kind are also wolves, then why don't you shift? Michael smiled. Some of us do, and some of us don't. Some of us only have the fangs. Booker looked like he was about to ask another question, but the elder spoke first. Son, we will have plenty of time for questions later. For now, we need to leave before your uncle wakes up, so we can gather those loyal to us. The events of tonight have made me realize we can no longer afford to follow my brother down this insane path he's leading us on. Michael turned to leave, but the elder stopped him. I'd like to speak with you more about this when we have time. Michael nodded and reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card for him. The number on there is my direct line. Contact me when you have a chance. In time, we may be able to reverse the effects of the curse and make you full-bloods. The elder smiled at that idea and shook Michael's hand. Watch your back out there. My brother will no doubt want vengeance. You will always have an ally from any of my supporters, though, although I'm not sure how many there are. I'll speak with you soon. Michael put his arm around Lisa and moved through the shadows until they were home. He let Arthur know to tell everyone to prepare for a turf war with a local pack of werewolves they encountered, and that if they were attacked, to show no mercy. Michael wasn't going to go easy on them. He was determined to show them whose territory this truly was, and how a true alpha leads a pack. It didn't take long for the first signs to pop up that Angus's brother was looking for war. Only 3 days after the encounter at the nightclub, most of Michael's patrols were being attacked. There were minor injuries here and there, but nothing fatal except on the werewolves' side. The werewolves were able to track their scent, but as soon as they moved through the shadows, they lost them. Angus called Michael by week's end to let him know that a third of the main pack had aligned with him, but they were taking casualties and could use Michael's support if he was still willing. He agreed to meet Angus in Forest Park to help him take out the main pack to bring them under control. He was going to put an end to this before it got too big and they started racking up civilian casualties. So he gathered all of his men, except for the 20 he left to protect the base. Bloodfang arrived in Forest Park in full armor, with his elite guard and 80 shadow wolves. They stayed in the shadows until they spotted Angus, Booker, and 50 werewolves, still in human form. Bloodfang teleported out into the open and walked up to greet Angus. He shook Bloodfang's hand as he looked around for any other shadow wolves. I appreciate your confidence, but these are still overwhelming odds for you to fight alone, even with us at your side. Bloodfang dropped his helm and smiled. Who said I was alone? Shadow wolves! His elite guard and 80 shadow wolves appeared in the clearing surrounding the werewolves. The werewolves became very uneasy and a few started to shift. Bloodfang's eyes started glowing bright red, and he let out a growl that made them all cower and pay attention. Even Angus bowed his head a little. I will not have fighting within our ranks. We have a bigger problem to take care of. Angus stepped forward. That was all I needed to see. Your power and your forces are far superior to our own. Angus turned to face his pack. From this point on, Arthur approached Angus and placed a hand on his shoulder. He is Bloodfang to all except those closest to him. Angus nodded. Bloodfang is your alpha. The werewolves in his pack all looked around at each other, and some appeared to disagree with the choice. Bloodfang stepped forward and looked at them with power radiating off of him. Anyone who disagrees with Angus's choice is welcome to challenge. A few began to step forward, but I would strongly advise against it. Bloodfang held his hands out towards the ground and kinetically made the earth quake beneath them. Those that appeared to challenge quickly backed down. Bloodfang turned his attention back to Angus. So where do we find your brother? Angus pointed to the east. He has a mansion out in Damascus, Oregon. He's holding a meeting with the remaining members of the pack to try to decide how to deal with me and how to eliminate you. Bloodfang smiled. Let's go crash the party. Angus nodded. We'll meet you there. Our vehicles are parked on the other side of the park. Bloodfang shook his head. Vehicles will take too long, and they'll hear us coming. Angus looked confused. Well, then what do you suggest? Bloodfang ordered the Shadow Wolves and the werewolves to pair up. He paired up with Angus and told the werewolves to hang on. Then he gave the order. To the shadows! They moved through the shadows for 20 minutes before they reached the boundary of Angus's brother's land. Angus took a moment to catch his breath. That's amazing! I've never experienced anything like that in my life! Bloodfang smiled. Definitely makes getting through traffic easy. Bloodfang zoomed in on the mansion with helmets, optics. He could see guards patrolling the grounds and some on the roof. Well, they're definitely expecting something. Let's make this quick. Shadow Wolves. While the werewolves rush the grounds, back them up through the shadows until we've infiltrated the mansion. Kill them without hesitation. Those that are loyal to Angus and myself have already shown themselves. The rest will learn swiftly the cost of going to war with the Shadow Wolves. Everyone nodded and growled in agreement. Then let's do this. For the wolf! The werewolves rushed the grounds out in the open, and in wolf form, while the Shadow Wolves moved in and took the enemy by surprise. Even the werewolves on the roof with their rifles learned quickly that shadows were everywhere, and they couldn't hide. Bloodfang and Angus made their way to the front door of the mansion, accompanied by the elite guard. Bloodfang held up a hand and the large wooden doors shattered under a telekinetic blast. As they moved inside, the elite guard made short work of the guards that were waiting for them. Something in the air caught Bloodfang's nose, though, a familiar scent. Since Angus was right next to him, he could smell it as well. What is that? Bloodfang curled a lip. It's living death. Vampires, to be exact. There's something more, though. As they made their way through the mansion, dispatching werewolves along the way, they came to a doorway that led downstairs into the main den for the pack. The scent seemed to be concentrated the heaviest down there. Bloodfang snarled, as did Angus. I don't like where this is leading. My brother's committed some atrocities in his time, but to align with the vampires is something I would never have thought he would do. When they got downstairs and found Angus, his brother, they found that he was doing exactly that. He was discussing a union between the werewolves and the vampires. Sitting across from his brother was none other than Vlad and Azrael. The whole room was filled with forces from either side, and though none of them looked very happy with the union, they didn't dare question the orders of their leaders. As soon as Bloodfang entered the room, Angus's brother ordered his wolves to attack. Bloodfang just stepped aside and let his guards enter the room and deal with the wolves. He looked over at Angus, who was eyeing his brother, and already looked like he was about to shift. He's all yours. The two brothers shifted and ran at each other. Azrael smiled at all the violence and death taking place before him. Vlad assumed that since Bloodfang's attention seemed to be on the battle, he'd take the opportunity to get the jump on him. As Vlad approached, salivating at the thought of killing his enemy, Bloodfang just glanced over his shoulder and made a motion like he was shooing him away. A telekinetic burst hit Vlad as he sailed through the air and impacted with a concrete wall. Vlad jumped back up to his feet and ran at Bloodfang, snarling with rage. As he drew close, Bloodfang turned and grabbed him by the throat. He held Vlad off to the side, paying very little attention, as he looked towards Azrael. Keep a leash on your pet. Bloodfang threw Vlad towards Azrael, who simply batted him off to the side like an annoying parasite. Angus's brother tossed him to the side and stomped towards Azrael. Are you just going to stand there? Azrael looked at him, completely unimpressed. I never said I was going to help you. I only came because you said you had information that was going to help me get him. Azrael pointed towards Bloodfang. He came to me instead. And there are no humans around this time. Azrael reached out his hand towards the werewolf, and then closed his fist. As he did this, all the life drained out of him, as his fur turned gray and fell out until he was nothing more than a brittle pile of bones. Azrael turned his attention towards Bloodfang, as the vampires now joined the fight against the Shadow Wolves. Luca went after Warclaw, and Dieter took on Soilfang, expecting to be fighting the same weak humans as before. It was a mistake they quickly regretted. Soilfang hit Dieter over the head with his cudgel, and split it in two, rendering him into ash. Warclaw just backhanded Luca with his gauntlet. The impact didn't kill him, but being hit with a holy weapon by someone with great strength burned his face and caved in his skull, knocking him unconscious. Azrael slowly walked toward Bloodfang, sizing him up and smiling the whole time. Vlad tried to join the fight, but was intercepted by Onyx. He lashed out at her, but no matter how hard he tried, she was always one step ahead. She danced around every attack easily and enjoying how frustrated she was making him. Azrael found amusement in Vlad's emasculating battle, but quickly put his attention back on Bloodfang when he drew his sword, which was glowing brightly with holy energy. Bloodfang waved the sword at him, egging him on to battle. "Come on, you overgrown pigeon. Let's get this over with." Azrael was not pleased with being insulted as he snarled and stretched out his wings. He held out a hand and raised the werewolf he had just killed from the dead, then sent it after Bloodfang. Bloodfang barely batted an eye as he took its head, with one swipe of his sword as it rushed in. He quickly learned, though, that the attack wasn't meant to kill him. It was just a distraction. As soon as he moved past the werewolf, Azrael kicked him in the chest, which slid him backward and slashed for his head with his sword, but Bloodfang blocked the shot with his arm. They traded attacks in a flurry of sword strikes, but neither one of them landed a hit until Bloodfang teleported behind him and struck his back, cutting him open. Azrael lurched forward in pain, then spun around. Bloodfang could see the rage in his cold black eyes. Azrael held out his hand and animated two more werewolves, which lunged at Bloodfang from behind, grabbing his arms and trying to restrain him. While he struggled to free himself, Azrael rushed forward. Just before he struck, Bloodfang teleported through the shadows with both of the undead werewolves in tow, and as he exited, he launched them both forward into a wall. He cut off one's head and tore off the other's spine from the neck. Azrael lunged in again, but Bloodfang spun around, blocking the attack and countering with a kick to Azrael's gut that sent him flying back 30 feet into a pillar, which shattered under the force. He sent two of the largest chunks from the pillar flying at Azrael, which both collided with his head, knocking him into his back. Then he kinetically yanked Azrael's sword from his hand and pinned him to the ground through his chest. Azrael's eyes went wide as he spit up some blood. As Bloodfang moved in for the final blow, Azrael roared and began radiating purple necrotic energy that moved out in waves across the room. It didn't harm Bloodfang as he moved through it with ease, but he started to hear the sounds of the Shadow Wolves in pain. When he turned to look, they were holding their stomachs and retching as they began to age and heal over and over again. It couldn't kill them because they had his DNA, but since they weren't full blood, it greatly weakened them. He saw Vlad dragging Luca and escaping through a crawl space that looked like a vent to the outside. Azrael began to pull the sword out of his chest and rise up from the ground. "I am the Angel of Death, and you will learn to fear that, you impotent little mutt. You are beneath me, and it is time that I teach you how to die properly." Bloodfang turned around as the energy coming off of Azrael was crackling with some kind of sick electricity. He continued to generate it, and Bloodfang wasn't sure when he would stop. As Azrael continued screaming and throwing what Bloodfang could only compare to an angelic temper tantrum, he became completely enraged. His eyes flared bright red, and he clenched his fists. "Enough!" Bloodfang roared as he raised his hands and kinetically brought the whole ceiling down on Azrael, shielding himself and the rest of the wolves behind a kinetic force field. The energy emanating from Azrael completely stopped, and as it did, the rest of the Shadow Wolves began to recover. The werewolves weren't so lucky, aside from Angus, who had crawled to safety before the wave hit, along with the rest that were still outside the room. His pack had been cut down from 50 to 15. In that one attack, Bloodfang growled in frustration. "Let's get out of here. We've done what we came here to do." As they exited, they saw that Bloodfang hadn't just brought down the ceiling. He brought down half the mansion on Azrael. Bloodfang slowly started to chuckle to himself. Warclaw looked at him in confusion. "What's so funny?" As Bloodfang continued walking away, he started skipping and singing his own version of the song from The Wizard of Oz. "Ding dong, the witch is dead. I just dropped a house on his head. Ding dong, the feathered bitch is dead." Once everyone got the reference, they all started laughing and joked about it the whole way home. And that is the end of Chapter 10. Well, hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notification bell so you can get informed every time I upload something new. Like it, share it with your friends, let them all know. We are trying to build this channel so we can bring you more stories, or we'll keep bringing them to you in a timely fashion. and also so we can entice other authors to come in and share their stories with you as well. So please do keep tuning in, and we will keep bringing you the stories. All right, talk to you guys soon. Bye.